We are on the verge of an unprecedented election night. Former President Donald Trump is expected to carry Texas for a third time. We're not a swing state, but the Senate race between Ted Cruz and Colin Allred is closer than many people expected. I sat down for one-on-one interviews with each candidate to talk about issues like abortion and border security. First up, Senator Cruz. Senator.
Good to see you.
How are you?
I'm doing well.
Welcome.
How's it going?
Well, you serve in Congress with Colin Allred.
Yeah.
Ever met him?
Never have.
Ever agree on policy?
Well, he actually just a week ago voted for a bill that I authored, so I was glad of that. It's a bill to streamline environmental permitting for new semiconductor manufacturing plants. It's a bill that I teamed up with Mark Kelly, Democrat from Arizona. We introduced it, we passed it through the Senate, and just last week the House passed it as well, and it went to the president's desk. The president just signed it. So it's a great victory for Texas. It's going to produce thousands of jobs in Texas, and I was glad that Colin voted for it.
All right, so on one bill at least you were on the same side.
Yeah.
You can't seem to shake the trip to Cancun. Does it bother you?
Oh, listen, it bothers me that there are Texans that believed that it said that I didn't care. I'll tell you what, I did one trip with my daughters to the beach, and it seems that folks on the left love to scream about it. And you know what I'll say is if you look at my record for 12 years, it's been a record of fighting for Texans every single day and producing real results to secure the border. I worked hand in hand with Donald Trump. We achieved historic success securing the border and achieving real results fighting for jobs. Look, my top priority is jobs.
So let me ask you on this topic. Do all the jokes and the comments about Cancun matter to voters?
Oh, look, it's something, for whatever reason, people on the left, they love to scream Cancun. It's become their sort of
but you don't think it matters to voters?
Look, I think what voters care about is their lives. I think voters care about jobs and freedom and security. And in my view, elections should be a comparison of the record of both candidates. And the reason why I'm very confident we're going to win in November is that my record has been one of fighting for the issues Texans care about. Why is it that we have 1,000 people a day coming to Texas? The number one reason is Texas is where the jobs are. And that's because we have low taxes and reasonable regulations. We have common sense policies in Texas. And that's what I've been leading the fight for day after day. And listen, Congressman Allred's record has been hard left. It doesn't reflect the values of Texas.
Let me stop you there. Talk about the race.
Yeah.
Texas statewide races, as you know, dominated by Republicans. 6 years ago, you barely won. You're in a dogfight now. Why are your races so close in Texas?
Well, listen, the Democrats, and Chuck Schumer in particular, have been clear that I'm his number one target there.
Why?
And because I lead the fight against all of the policies he's pushing that are hurting Texas. Look, Chuck Schumer and Joe Biden and Kamala Harris, they want open borders. They're responsible for this invasion at our southern border, 11.5 million illegal aliens. Colin Allred has voted for open borders over and over and over again. And every time, I'm the one that stands up and leads the fight against it. You know, if you want to see why, take a look at the Democrat National Convention. When Congressman Allred spoke there, at the end of his speech, the entire stadium spontaneously began chanting, "Beat Ted Cruz." 20,000 elected Democrat delegates, because, look, if you're a hardcore partisan Democrat, after Donald Trump, there's nobody in the country you want to beat more than me. Because I'm the one that is fighting against the policies they're pushing that are doing so much harm to Texas.
So in that vein, are you worried turnout for Kamala Harris will affect you?
Well, listen, I am confident about the election. I think Donald Trump is going to win. I know Donald Trump is going to win Texas, and I think we're going to win here in Texas because we're going to focus on my record versus Colin Allred's. Let's take the border, for example.
Okay, so I want to interrupt you if you don't mind, because you just talked about the border and the insistence on border security.
Yeah.
Border security here, very important for
Absolutely.
Texans. Yet you voted against a bipartisan security bill. Why?
Because it was a terrible bill. It was a bill written by Chuck Schumer that didn't secure the border.
But it had bipartisan support.
It was a terrible bill. When it was released, the support collapsed within 24 hours. Let me tell you why, Len, because it matters what's in this bill. This bill codified it, put into federal law Kamala Harris and Colin Allred's open border policies. It put into federal law.
What does that mean, open border policy?
Let me tell you, catch and release. So when Donald Trump was president, I worked hand in hand with him to secure the border, and we achieved incredible results. We produced the lowest rate of illegal immigration in 45 years. That's what Biden and Harris inherited. And they deliberately broke the border. And the number one way they did so is as soon as they came into office, Biden and Harris began implementing catch and release. So they catch illegal immigrants and they let them go. And the numbers instantly skyrocketed from the lowest rate in 45 years to the highest rate in history. And here's what you need to understand. Colin Allred supports catch and release. Kamala Harris supports catch and release. And the Chuck Schumer bill wrote catch and release into the law. That bill was so bad, it normalized 5,000 illegal immigrants a day. That's 1.8 million illegal immigrants a year, every year forever. It was designed to keep this border invasion happening forever. And Len, you want to understand the consequences of these open borders? Look no further than Jocelyn Nungre, the beautiful 12-year-old girl right here in Houston, who was raped and murdered by two illegal immigrants, both from Venezuela, who Biden and Harris apprehended, and they released them the very same day. And just weeks later, those two illegal immigrants came to Houston, and they raped and murdered that 12-year-old girl. That is happening over and over and over again, and our families are a lot less safe and secure.
So back to the bipartisan bill. Okay. You said the bipartisan security bill was no good.
It was a terrible
So what do you propose?
What I propose is H.R. 2, which is the legislation I introduced, which is the toughest border security legislation ever introduced. It ends catch and release. It ends sanctuary cities. It cuts off the money for sanctuary cities. And you know what? Colin Allred voted no. Colin Allred has 3 times voted against the border wall. And you know what Colin Allred calls the border wall? He calls it that racist border wall. And he has pledged to personally tear down that racist border wall.
I've seen the ad.
But look, to be clear, the ad is video of him talking.
Yes.
Those are his own words. But let me tell you something that is amazing. He is right now running millions of dollars of TV ads with him standing in front of the thing he calls that racist border wall. And there's a dynamic. It's the dynamic that's true at the presidential race and the Senate race. Both Kamala Harris and Colin Allred are effectively hiding in Joe Biden's basement. They're running away from their records, and they're pretending their record is the opposite of what it is. I'm running on my record because I'm proud of my record as the leading champion for securing the border for 12 years in the United States.
So you talk about security at the border. Let's talk about security in general. What do you propose to lessen the number of mass shootings in Texas?
Well,
I'm sure you know a long list of the shootings that have happened here.
Well, absolutely, and I have led the fight for 12 years to invest in law enforcement. And if you want to stop mass shootings, the key to doing it is putting violent criminals in jail, locking up the bad guys and ensuring that they can't buy weapons illegally. And I got to tell you, when it comes to law and order, Colin Allred's record is terrible. He has repeatedly voted for releasing violent criminals from jail. In the District of Columbia, Colin Allred voted to lessen the sentences for murderers, for rapists, for carjackers, and those that are armed intruders in homes. His vote was so radical that Joe Biden didn't agree with it. And there's a reason in Houston, Len, there's a reason that Kim Ogg, the elected Democrat district attorney, has endorsed me. Because Kim Ogg has said she wants a senator who stands up to criminals, keeps criminals in jail, and will fight to secure the border. And Colin Allred's record has been terrible on all of that.
So I want to, you use this word radical, referring to Colin Allred. He and his supporters have used the term radical relating to your position on abortion. For example, in Texas, no exception for rape or incest. Are you fine with that?
Look, what I believe, what the Supreme Court said in Dobbs, is that abortion is an issue people of good faith disagree, and disagree strongly. People have deeply held views
Are
on
you
both
okay
sides.
with the Texas
I'm answering your question.
exception on rape and incest?
What the Supreme Court said is on questions where we disagree, the way we resolve those under our Constitution is the voters in each state, which means the voters of Texas reach one answer, the voters of California a different one, the voters of Florida and New York reach different answers. And so I think that's a question for the state legislature to decide and for the governor to decide. I trust the voters of Texas. It is not a question that is before the United States Congress. It is a question for the voters in Texas.
What is your personal stance on abortion?
Listen, I support life, but I also think it's the voters that have the right to choose. And I'll tell you, if you want to know the legislation I've introduced, I'll tell you what I've introduced. I've introduced legislation to protect in vitro fertilization, to protect IVF, to put in federal law a clear statutory protection that every parent has a right to access IVF. I think IVF is a medical miracle. 2% of all births in America come from IVF. Over 8 million babies have been born from IVF. And I'll tell you, it was really sad when I went to the Senate floor with Senator Katie Britt from Alabama, and we tried to pass our legislation together. The Democrats stood up and blocked it. And you know why they blocked it? Because they cynically want to try to scare the voters and tell them IVF is in jeopardy, rather than protect it in federal law and make clear that IVF will be protected for every potential mom and dad.
You've just made it clear. You said you support life.
Yes.
Back to the question. Are you okay with no exception for rape and incest in the state of Texas?
Well, that's a question the state legislature is going to decide.
What does Ted Cruz think?
I think it is up to the voters of Texas to decide that.
What do you think?
I recognize you don't like that answer, but that's my answer anyway.
I'm trying to get an answer. I
have given you an answer. It is up to the voters of Texas to decide. If you want to ask me 3 more times, we can do this 3 more times.
I know you've seen the campaign ad with the mother of Jocelyn Nungaray. Alexis Nungaray blames you in part for her daughter's death. If you could speak to the mother, what would you say to her?
Well, I'm a father of 2 young boys. I just can't imagine how I would feel if anything happened to them at all. And so what I want to say is that I think just taking your grief and turning it into action is admirable. I take issue with what I think Senator Cruz has done with that grief.
Jocelyn Nungaray's mother went on to say this, quote, "If Allred is elected, my heart will break again." As a parent, I'm sure you understand the grief.
Yeah. Well, all I can say is I feel horrific for what's happened to our family, and that I will do everything I can, and I have done in my time in Congress, to not only protect Texas families, but to also solve problems. This is why it's so important to me that we not just talk about an issue, that we not just use it as a campaign issue, but that you actually solve them. In my 6 years in Congress, I've been the most bipartisan Texan in Congress. I do that not because that's the end goal, but because the end goal is to actually get things done. And that's the way that you get things done in a divided country and a divided capital.
I want to get your thought about something. Republicans say you push so-called catch and release. So what is your position on that?
Yeah. Listen, catch and release is a policy that the federal is set at the executive level in terms of what do we do with folks who are coming here and seeking asylum. What I have said is that we have to reform and fix our broken immigration system and secure the border. And one of those components is changing catch and release. That's also what was in the Senate bill.
Change it how?
Well, what we're doing is saying we have to change the standard for who is able to seek asylum. Because what was happening, and folks should understand this, is if you come and you seek asylum, and then you are released into the country while your asylum case is pending, it may take 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 years for you to get that to be adjudicated. About 90% of these folks are going to have that application denied because they are not falling into one of the asylum factors. What we're trying to do is to change that so that more will be rejected initially, and also to put resources to address the backlog of folks who are sitting there waiting to have their asylum claim heard. And so that's what we're trying to address. And so when folks go after and take down a bill like that, what you're doing is preventing us from solving the problem of the asylum system being abused and this process taking entirely too long and being unfair both to the migrants and to our communities.
I talked to an immigration attorney who kind of hit on what you just said, that federal law requires you to provide a hearing for asylum seekers.
Right. That's right.
The problem is you don't have enough judges to process or the space to hold, so you let people go.
That's right.
Pending a hearing.
That's right.
On top of that, you don't know sometimes who you're releasing, whether they're bad people, as in the case of what happened here.
There is an initial screening, but that doesn't get everybody. But this is important. This is why we're trying to hire hundreds of new immigration judges in that bill. This is why we're also going to hire 4,000 at least new asylum officers to help deal with that backlog and to process folks faster. So it's, again, anybody on the internet can point out problems. you don't elect people to point out problems. You elect people to solve the problems. That's what folks like me and others were trying to do in a bipartisan way. That's what Ted Cruz prevented us from doing. So I don't have a lot of patience for somebody who takes down a bill specifically aimed at addressing this problem for a partisan gain and then uses it to say, well, you haven't done anything to stop this. No, you stopped us from solving this problem.
It's not possible, is it, for us to accept all the people that want to come into this country?
Of course not.
So we need to come up with a system that accommodates those who qualify for asylum or qualify for a work visa, and everybody else has to wait.
Yes, that's right. And listen, not everyone is able to stay. And
but the accusation is that you are an open border policy
it's ridiculous. And you know what, I don't think it's worth repeating because it's not true. But I also think that when you're talking about immigration, as a country that also wants to be a beacon for the best and the brightest from around the world, that as you are addressing our broken border and legal immigration system, you have to do it in a way that keeps those best and brightest coming here because they contribute to what makes our state and our country so great. We are a nation of immigrants. We're also a nation of laws. Those laws have not in large part been updated since Ronald Reagan was in the White House. Ted Cruz has had 12 years. He's prevented us from changing those laws to make them better. So to me, I don't have much patience for this. I am someone who comes from the wing of get things done and wants to make sure that we do that. I don't want to play games with this. I actually want to solve it.
Let's talk about protecting the vote. Your background, you're a civil rights attorney who worked on voting rights. You voted against the SAVE Act, a bill that requires individuals to provide proof of U.S. citizenship to register in federal elections. Why?
Yeah, listen, this is what the state does. When you register to vote, your citizenship is confirmed by the state of Texas, right? That is how you do it. It's just true that many Houstonians, many Texans, are not carrying around with them a birth certificate or a passport. Many don't have a passport. And so what this was really about was saying, let's try and make it harder to register to vote, right?
Because so you're saying the state should...
It's their state's responsibility.
Should verify.
Of course, that's what they do.
You don't need a federal law.
No, in fact, we have multiple layers of confirmation that you are eligible to vote, not just about your citizenship, but also about your status, whether or not you are a felon and you're fully done serving your time in Texas. That's our law as well. That's also reviewed by the state. Should you have to carry a paper with you saying that? I mean, let's be honest about this. Voter registration in this state is more difficult than any other state in the country. If I wanted to register you right now, I'd have to get deputized by Harris County. It would last 2 years. I'd have 5 days to turn in your voter registration form or I'd face criminal penalties. It's an attempt to make it harder to register to vote.
But shouldn't you make it not necessarily difficult, but you should verify whether people are qualified?
Of course, that's the state's responsibility.
Yeah.
And what we're talking about here is whose burden is it? Whose burden is it? Is it somebody who is working 2 or 3 jobs and just wants to register and be involved in their democracy, who is a citizen and who is going to turn in their voter registration form and then be confirmed by the state of Texas, who then sends them back a form in the mail saying, here's your voter registration card because we have verified that you meet all of the criteria to vote in our state? That is what we have right now.
You're saying we've done it.
That's right.
We've got it.
And that's what we're doing. And so folks should be confident in this because I think what you're seeing is an attempt to kind of hide an effort to make it much more difficult for people to be involved in our democracy. And when you have a state like ours, where we already have one of the lowest voter turnouts in the country, this is a problem for us. And it's partly, in part, because of some of the laws that we have in place.
Let's move on. Gender debate. You said Ted Cruz is lying about you supporting boys competing with girls. The question is, do you support transgender girls, those identified as male at birth, who then compete against girls?
This is already in the state law in Texas that this is not legal. And so listen, what we have to talk about is why is Ted Cruz trying to distract folks with this? Is this the biggest issue facing Texans? Or is it the fact that he's uniquely responsible for this abortion ban that's forced 26,000 Texas women to give birth to their rapist child?
So state law already prevents
It's already our state law.
But all these ads,
well, it's all
even
nonsense.
with an Allred jersey,
right, it's
looking imposing as if this is actually happening.
Well, and I think we should, and folks should ask themselves.
What's the state law that prevents it?
Well, there's a recent state law that passed that says you have to conform with your gender identity. But listen, that's not the issue. The issue, I really want to stress this.
Yes.
This is not a major issue in Texas. A senator who's been there for 12 years is asking for 6 more years, exclusively on the basis of trying to scare Texans about what's not happening in our state. Doesn't that raise some alarm bells then maybe it's because he doesn't have anything to say that he's done for you and your family. He has nothing to run on. So all he has is fear and division. I think Texans are tired of it. They're ready to turn the page.
I guess what they're trying to pin on you is you would support it if it were
Listen,
an option.
No, here's the thing. You don't want, at the federal level, senators deciding who's playing sports. That's not how we do these things. We have communities and leagues and families and schools that are better situated to make these decisions, right? And that's how this has been done for our entire history. I played 3 varsity sports at Hillcrest High School in Dallas. It was all district in 3, right? The only position Ted Cruz has ever played is left out, right? So he should stick out and stay out of this discussion, in my opinion.
People opposed to the idea argue if you are identified as male at birth, but now transition and identify as female, competing against females is unfair.
Right. I understand.
Whether it's here or at the college level,
I understand.
They say it's unfair.
I understand.
And do you think it's unfair?
Listen, I think that a senator's job is to deal with issues that are facing our entire state, that's facing our entire country, that are real issues, not to make things up, not to find one single example out of 1,000 or 1,000,000 and to spend all of your time scaring people about that. We have a word for that. It's called demagoguery. And that's not what Texans expect. What most Texans hope is that the schools they send their kids to are going to be a good school. Ted Cruz wants to defund those schools. They want to send their kid to a school of higher education, maybe. They can't afford it. They want to make sure that when they retire, they can do that with dignity. Ted Cruz wants to cut their Medicare and their Social Security. That's what most Texans are concerned about.
You said if elected, you'll restore a woman's right to choose and make Roe v. Wade the law of the land again. Congressman, how are you going to do that? You need the numbers.
Yeah, we're going to.
And you need a Democratic president.
Listen, you'll be surprised at what can happen after we beat Ted Cruz in this race, because it's important. Folks all across the country have turned their eyes to the stories that are happening right here in Texas, of 26,000 women being forced to give birth to their rapist child, of individual stories like Amanda and Josh Zarowski introduced me the other night.
Do you think you're going to get the numbers in Congress to overturn, or
to
restore Roe v. Wade?
Yes, and it's already something that is bipartisan. There's 2 Republican senators right now, and Susan Collins and Lisa Murkowski, who have said they want to make Roe v. Wade the law of the land again.
What's the vote that you need?
Well, let's not get into vote counting before an election, because you have to find out what the election says first.
Okay.
But I also think that elections have consequences, and that there can be ripple effects from them. And that when you take away a fundamental freedom from Texas women, from women across this country, and you're uniquely responsible for that, you have to be held accountable for it.